This is part 4. Part 4. Including the unicorn. Time now for animal crime and punishment. Yes, crime and punishment. Back in the Middle Ages in France, pigs and hogs often had the run of the streets in cities and villages. And sometimes they even ran into humans. In one case, a hog, apparently unintentionally, but we're not certain, killed a young child. And he was put on trial and sentenced to death by flogging. He was actually dressed in human clothes, placed on a wheel, and then whipped until he be dead. That's one of the strangest cases we have from our file on animal crime and punishment. Beyond belief, is it not? Time now to open the vault of strange animal deaths. The case of Clyde the ostrich. Now, Clyde was a family pet on a Nebraska farm. He not only had the run of the farm, but also got into the house sometimes. Certainly, sometimes he would stick his head through the window. One day, poor Clyde got into Milady's jewel box, and he saw a beautiful diamond brooch, and he swallowed it. But it got lodged in his throat, and he choked to death. Of course, one thing was certain, Clyde had expensive taste. Let's try another one. Here's the case of the Russian collie. Now, this happened back in 1994 in the town of Pushkina, which is near Moscow. A man, Yuri Petrov, 84, had died. He died on December 28th. His body was placed in a coffin, an open coffin, in his apartment on the 9th floor of his building on New Year's Eve, and his friends and relatives came to pay their final respects. His poor collie, his beloved collie for many years, was obviously grief-stricken. He sensed what had happened, that his master was dead. And all day long, that poor collie just moped around the apartment. Then, at the end of the day, as sunset was coming about, the collie leapt out of the window and to his death, apparently committing suicide out of respect for his beloved owner. So don't say animals don't have feelings. This case definitely proves it. Now, what about animals being used in warfare? Well, we happen to have here, if I could get it on this pin, an insect. And would you believe that in history, throughout history, insects have been used as weapons of war? Now, the first apparent documented case comes from 72 B.C. in the Greek town of Zemkritis, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Romans were tunneling under the city for a sneak attack, but they were discovered by some sharp-eyed Greeks. So do you know what those Greeks did? They took beehives and sealed them with mud and then tossed them into the tunnels where they broke open and drove out the invading Romans. In 195 AD, the Romans got a similar treatment when they invaded the town of Hatra in Iraq. But there, instead of beehives, hornets were placed in pots of pottery that were sealed at one end and then hurled at the invading Romans. And again, that drove them off. During the Middle Ages, insects, and again we're talking basically about bees, wasps, and hornets, the stinging variety, were used many times. Henry I used beehives against enemies. And in one Prussian town, when invaders from the north were about to overrun the town, nuns at a convent who were keeping bees let loose those bees from their hives to attack the invaders and drove them off. That town today is known as Bayenburg, which translates as Bee City. During World War I, Germans set up booby traps that included beehives. And As recently as the Vietnamese War, the Viet Cong also set up booby traps using ferocious giant Asian honeybees to attack Americans. In fact, the ploy was so successful that it's said that our Defense Department considered trapping those bees and using them against the Viet Cong. So I think this is amazing that throughout history, sharp, strategical minds came up with the idea to use bees, hornets, and wasps as weapons of war. Almost beyond belief. That's why we say sometimes truth indeed is stranger than fiction. Now, until next time, may the power of the cosmos be with you. Yes!